Welcome to Exasperated Nerd Explains. With the release of Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, the saga is ending and the trilogy complete.
Failure is complete.
Well, that too. And time will tell where Rise of Skywalker falls within the fandom community, but that's for a different video. Instead, I'm putting forward that no matter what happens, the new trilogy was flawed from the start and destined to fail.
No, it is unavoidable. It is your destiny.
Which is not a surprise if you read the title of this video. Now what do I mean by that? I don't mean there shouldn't have been any more Star Wars at all. I am saying most of the blame is laid at the feet of Rian Johnson and The Last Jedi for completely derailing and ruining the franchise, and I'm certainly guilty of that myself, but in reality, there should be more focus on The Force Awakens as the driving force behind this trilogy's downfall. Now, in a film-to-film showdown, The Force Awakens is much better than The Last Jedi. Hands down, no question. The Force Awakens sets up some interesting things, it has some new characters, and it has some fun scenes. In comparison, The Last Jedi is a farce. If you told me Rian Johnson lost a bet and purposely made it as terrible as possible, I would believe you. My issues with The Force Awakens is in relation to the canon. If it was set a few hundred years later, most of my issues would be non-existent, but instead it anchors itself to the original trilogy, which drags it down and brings us to the setup. The setup for The Force Awakens on a galactic scale is confusing at a glance and just plain convoluted the more you think about it. The problem comes from trying to do two things simultaneously. J.J. Abrams wanted to go mining for nostalgia by setting up similar circumstances to A New Hope, but did not want to completely invalidate the victory at the end of Return of the Jedi. With the second Death Star destroyed and the Emperor slain, supposedly, the promise of the ending is that the Empire is defeated and the Rebellion victorious. I'm just going to talk about the films and ignore the expanded universe, because that's what Disney did anyways. The cleanest way to do this is to have the Empire survive and continue to rule. But that would mean our heroes were utter failures and the Galactic Civil War has continued for another 30 plus years. This would work, but would also undermine everything in the first trilogy. That means the Empire is off the table as a villain, but now they need a real existential threat, and climate change won't cut it. Hey, you could have the heroes in control and the bad guys rebelling. That might be interesting. Oh no, wait, that's the prequels. Nope. Can't touch that. So the filmmaker's solution? It's easy. There's a Republic government, but the quasi-empire group the First Order is also out there operating, and have been for years since they raised Finn and other stormtroopers since birth, building giant Star Destroyers and turning an entire planet into a weapon. The Republic is for some reason ignoring this threat even though they are a few years removed from toppling an evil empire. Leia makes her own paramilitary group and calls them the Resistance, who are specifically resisting the First Order and not the New Republic. The New Republic ignores them too. I'm not sure how all these military organizations operate within the confines of the Republic government or what they can and can't do, since as far as I know they don't hold any real territory besides the First Order's planet-sized weapon, since presumably the First Order can't expand militarily while working within the confines of the New Republic. See? Simple! Compare that to the original trilogy. There's the Empire ruling with an iron fist and the Rebellion fighting against them in the name of freedom. Good and evil. Boom, done. No shades of gray here. No, Cassie, don't go murdering that guy. Come on. Years later, reading follow-up information in the new canon, I still don't understand exactly how all this works in The Force Awakens. How they interact with each other, how each organization is around. It's a long way to go try to set it up like A New Hope, and despite their efforts, does lessen the original trilogy's triumph. Which brings us to, there are no happy endings. One thing that's been brought up, mostly to dismiss any negative criticism, is that Star Wars is not science fiction, but science fantasy, that its use of the hero's journey and archetypal characters dips into the realm of fairy tales and kids' stories.
Because Luke Skywalker's Cinderella, or Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
Well gang, the setup of this new trilogy erased the fairy tale happy endings of our heroes. Han and Leia, finally admitting their love for each other, well, they wind up separated for years after their child kills a bunch of people, and are reunited for a few minutes before Han gets himself killed by that same child. Leia establishes a new rebranded rebellion, filling the same role she played a lifetime ago, having made no real progress in the fight for freedom in the galaxy, stuck in a lifelong cycle of watching soldiers and friends die in defiance of an evil ruler. Luke, last of the Jedi, starts a school to train the next generation, but then fails as a Jedi Master, with all of his students being killed by Kylo Ren, his nephew, who fell to the dark side. Luke also seems responsible for the final push Kylo had over the edge. He has hidden himself away, content to die alone and let the Jedi Order die with him. Yay! Yippee! What a victory! It was certainly all worth it. I'm all for freedom, but if they were unable to keep the Republic going without the rise of the Empire 2.0 a few years later, they were not fit to govern and they did a crap job of setting up the new Republic government. By its very existence and insistence on bringing back the original characters as side characters in this new trilogy, they ripped away the happy endings that were promised to these characters. This is the high point of their lives. It's all back downhill from here. But it wasn't all the Force Awakens, right? Even if it undercut the first trilogy, it was the Last Jedi that squandered the plot points that were set up, including Luke. Dangling plot threads formed the noose. When I first saw the Force Awakens in theaters, I was happy to see Luke at the end of the film, and was utterly disappointed by the direction they took him in The Last Jedi. From what I can tell, many others felt the same way.
The hardest thing I had to do was his radical reimagining of that character. Hey, what happened between the last one and this one, where the most optimistic guy in the galaxy becomes a suicidal, cranky old man telling people to get off his lawn? And it's just a Luke that I didn't really understand.
As I pointed out in a previous video, Luke was originally going to be lifting boulders around him with the Force in the final moments of the film, and they cut it at the last minute because they figured out where The Last Jedi was going. The hatred for what they did to the character of Luke Skywalker is deserved, but should also be directed at The Force Awakens. Why, you might ask? It was Last Jedi who turned him into someone wanting to die, drinking sea cow milk and disavowing all the hope and all the good he had done. Why blame The Force Awakens? If you feel this way, ask yourself something. What possible explanation for Luke hiding away for a decade plus would have been satisfying? Really take a moment here and think about it. What valid reason could Luke Skywalker, who grew up with the Empire ruling, who lost friends, who risked life and limb, to stop them, have for sitting around while the First Order rose to prominence and killed billions, or even trillions? Is there any reason that would sit well with you? Even if he refused to train any more Jedi because it always ends the same, he should have been right back out there with the resistance, as a pilot or warrior or general. If Ben Solo turned to the dark side had just happened, or happened within a year and Luke was searching through the history of the Jedi due to his doubts in himself and thinking he did something wrong, I could buy that. But this? Just no. Luke's character was sacrificed upon the altar of Rian Johnson's freedom to do whatever he pleased.
He poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life.
But J.J. Abrams put him there, and that's because there was never a plan.
People are counting on us. The galaxy is counting on us. Solo, we'll figure it out. We'll use the Force. That's not how the Force works.
One reason why the original Star Wars worked and is so beloved is that it works as a standalone movie, but established a world that could continue to be explored. If it ended there, it would have told one story and been complete. The Force Awakens suffered from sequel setup syndrome, concentrating on making something epic by establishing plot threads to be resolved in a later movie instead of focusing on the film at hand.
All his life as he looked away to the future, to the horizon, never his mind on where he was, what he was doing.
The problem is there were no planned answers to any of these questions, which let Rian Johnson dismiss, dismantle, and destroy them. Marvel movies get criticized for setting stuff up like this, but you can't say they don't know where they are going with what they are trying to establish. J.J. Abrams is an expert of establishing interesting questions without having an answer. I'm looking at you, Lost, which expanded with question after question into a vast mythology that collapsed in on itself like a dying star into a black hole of suck at the end.
In the old days, there was an overall outline. This one's more like a relay race, where the first guy runs the race and hands the torch off.
And I hear the counter argument that they obviously didn't have a plan between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. What with this?
My sister has it.
Has what? What did you give her? Oh no. But at least that was still under the control of one creator who cared enough about the plot threads that he established to tie them into the story properly. And J.J. Abrams didn't do Rian Johnson any favors by ejecting himself from Star Wars franchise after aiming it towards a mountain. And if you're thinking, Most of my criticisms here aren't really about the new trilogy, but how they interact with the old one. You are correct! That's the point. They started this trilogy off by tripping down the stairs. If they hadn't dusted off the heroes from the first films and pushed them off to the side, all of these criticisms listed here would have gone away. I mean, there's still other issues I have with these new films, but that's separate to my point. And yes, I want the originals to come back, and I understand to have any adventures with the original trilogy characters, there would have to be new conflict, but they could have at least started them out in a good place. Like the intervening years were happy, and all of a sudden a new threat appears. They didn't have to show beyond a shadow of a doubt that since we last saw them, they've been utterly miserable failures, because that's what's happened. The new trilogy could have gone many different ways, but was flawed in its setup and doomed to failure. But what do you think? Are you a defender of the new trilogy? Am I wrong, and should my ire be directed at The Last Jedi, like so many others say? Please leave a comment below. You could also, subscribe to my channel, or at least like the video. That's just one click, it's easy to do. Bye.